All righty, you should be all set.
Planning board is now in session. It's Monday, September 13th, 2021, 7:05 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. People who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so by finding the meeting at https://www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. First item on the agenda is a discussion item, the master plan update, master plan committee update. Mrs. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Master Plan Committee will be meeting again on September 22nd, which is next week, and we hope to go over the draft chapters. I also hope to discuss with the committee whether we should hire some outside help to put the plan together and get all the formatting correct. Hopefully we'll continue to move on. I think we may still be missing a couple of chapters from people, but we're in pretty good shape.
When did you start this master plan process?
A very long time ago. Is it in 2018?
Yeah, that's right, 2018. Well, great.
Also, there's some data sets there's a few data sets remaining that we'll probably have updated for the master plan committee as well through a consultant, which was already in the works, kind of a phase 2 to last fiscal years where they did maybe 60% of them. And also we have someone to appoint this evening with the planning board. Zoning Board of Appeals recommended that Deborah DeMoria be appointed as their representative and ex officio to the master plan committee. Is that correct, Mimi?
That is correct.
Should we do that now?
I anticipate to be part of this agenda item.
So move.
Mr.
Second.
Mills and Mr. Stein. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yeah.
Houlihan, yes.
Anything else on the master plan committee update? Questions, comments?
And that term will be through to June 30th, 2022.
Next item on the agenda. It's public hearing, 6 to 8 Turnpike Road modification to major site plan. This is continued from July 19th and August 16th. We'll ask the town planner to give us the latest on this proposal in the public hearing.
Just took a note up. So as you said, the prior public hearing was on August 16th, continued to this evening. In the interim, we received a third submission with some revisions that Peter Bemis from Engineering Design Consultants provided in hard copy, which were distributed to the planning board members. And a little bit too close to this meeting, so Peter's aware that the planning board may or may not listen to any extensive presentation. He has already signed an extension request for continuation to the next meeting on September 27th. But I believe he was going to be present this evening to present a couple of things that he is updating on the plans to address a list of outstanding items. We had received a Fuss and O'Neill review letter on the second submission, which most of the feedback was contingent on planning board providing a waiver or a condition in the decision. There were two outstanding items from that letter, which was a handicap parking space to be included. And then also a correction on the note on the plans regarding the referenced existing conditions plan, which he had used a as-built from Cornerstone on. So I did receive an email this afternoon, early evening, that he was planning to be here to speak to the planning board on the minor changes that he is still incorporating but hasn't submitted plans yet. So let's see if he's here. He's there. Sarah, you see him? Okay. So if you elevate him, then he can speak to it if the planning board chooses to.
Okay with me.
Okay. Here he comes.
There we go.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Welcome back, Peter. You're on.
Okay, thank you. We did provide a revised plan and did address what I saw with the outstanding comments. So the one item that was further revised was the substitution of 3 to 3.5 inch pin oaks for the maples to address Mr. Luttrell's comment regarding a salt tolerant species, which the pin oak would be far better than the maple. And that's a very majestic tree, which would look nice in the setting that we're proposing. So that change was made in addition to the others. Handicap parking spaces were updated on the plan that you had seen. But one was that storage comment, and I apologize for that. It still said storage. Now the plan would just read 58 parking spaces total. There's no reference to any adjective associated with the parking spaces other than the handicap parking spaces. There are 3 designated spaces now. There happened to be enough room across the front of the site to fit those 3 without altering the overall parking pattern across the front. And there'll be an additional sign proposed.
Those
So
do appear
last-
to meet the ADA requirements as well. I checked the ADA dimensional
van.
requirements for those.
1 van and then 2 others, the standard 5-foot aisle spaces were provided. And then the only other thing that I saw that was still a requirement, and I tried to address it in the cover letter and prepared to further address it this evening, was the issue of lid. We were changing a site that had a lid permit, and I recognize a responsibility to do that. And when I answered the questions the first time through about the stormwater management system, when we did that, we didn't take credit for an infiltrative drainage system, meaning that the original design didn't do so, so we didn't do so as a way of making the system smaller, because when you infiltrate, you actually need less capacity within the stone voids and chambers. So I wanted to make myself a little bit clearer, is that in our design, we provided an equal volume of storage. And what we're doing is we're restricting the outlet so that every single storm will discharge significantly less than what the previous design was with the surface system. So there's a double benefit. One is that the rate of runoff from this site is dropped considerably. And then we are affording the opportunity for infiltration of stormwater. But what we didn't do was take credit for that infiltration. So that somehow may have been interpreted as not being a lid principle, but it definitely is. So I wanted to restate that we are pre-treating all of our stormwater for the site, which the previous design was doing through a sediment trap 4 bag. We're actually putting in a contact proprietary solution in 2 locations on the site, because there's 2 different discharge streams. And then we are holding all of the water as much as we can for each storm. So we actually get the added benefit of a reduced rate of runoff and more infiltration as a result from that. We are rendering more of the site impervious, which is somewhat contrary to lid, but that's the only way I can expand the parking lot. So I just wanted to try to put a better spin on lid principles than maybe I did the previous time, which I believe this site does, so that there are some enhanced benefits. And the only other thing would have been that we could have put some open channel flow with this system. However, when this site was originally permitted, Mass Highway, which we connect our stormwater to, insisted that this actually have a separate discharge stream from the site to the discharge point. We do not connect into the Route 9 system itself. We have a separate line that runs into the state layout and discharges where their water discharges from Route 9. So they have the same discharge point. And that would have been another lid principle that we could have invoked, but I can't, because I can't properly then address Mass Highway for their requirements. So I hope that in the whole collective overview of this, that we would see that, you know, we are trying to demonstrate that we comply with lid. And I do know there was one other question that was asked, was could I look into doing some other lid treatment somewhere else in town? And I did reach out to Karen Galligan's office, but did not hear back relative to where there may be the need for that somewhere in town. So I guess we'd still be open to that requirement should it be needed. But again, I think the project does stand on its own the way it's been designed. But if someone still feels the need to do that, we'd be open. I just didn't get any response back from DPW. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up to the board. Mr. Mills? Questions, comments?
Thanks, Peter. So can you just explain again that lid piece? You're saying that was already built and you didn't take credit for it, or that's what you're proposing and you didn't take credit for it?
Right. Yeah. So we're proposing. So under lid, there's lots of criteria. Actually, I tried to find them. But really narrowing down the 5 principles of lid. Conserve natural areas wherever possible. Don't pave. So I'm paving in this instance. So it's kind of hard to meet that one. Minimize development impacts on hydrology. We're definitely doing that. We infiltrate our water. We discharge at a lower rate. Maintain the rate of runoff and the duration being held on the site. We do that because, again, we're reducing the rate by throttling down the outlet control, and we're trying to keep as much water on site by infiltrating more. The other principle would be scattering integrated management practices, IMPs, and decentralizing the water flow. So again, we infiltrate, we store, we detain on site, and then implement proper pollution control measures, which again, by having the contact units, I actually have a proprietary system here that will be maintained on an annual basis to help remove sediment. So for the 5 general principles, only the first one is the one that we really don't hit because we're adding more pavement. In our system, the way we designed it, we didn't take credit in our stormwater design for the infiltration because that would have meant that I could have made the storage area smaller. That's the big difference. We did not take credit for any infiltration, even though it's going to occur.
But again, Peter, my question is, are you saying that's in the new system or what was already built?
No, the new system. That's what I'm saying, the new system.
Okay. All right. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Stein.
My question is regarding item 20 of Fuss and O'Neill's comments. So, Peter, is engineering design consultants coming in behind Cornerstone with the can you just kind of clarify the as-built?
Sure.
issue?
So when we were first given the as-built, it referred to 6 Turnpike Road in Framingham, Massachusetts. So that was the first issue. And I also don't think planning board even had a copy. Karina, through the planning board office, had a copy of it. So we had reached out to them and said, look, we'll just put an asterisk on the plan. There was a thought that it had to have a signature block, and I'm trying to think of what else was on there. So we put some annotations on Cornerstone's plan and made it part of the set. We, after submittal, had second thoughts on that, and we revoked that plan. Asked Cornerstone to please issue the plan again with Southborough being listed as the town, and recognize that we were using that as a reference for this site because it basically is the as-built condition, and we're only trying to affect one corner of the site. Cornerstone had started the design process that we're finishing here. The owner of the project asked us to pick up where they had started. So right now, the as-built plan is an official plan. It has a corrected town reference. We're referencing on our first sheet, and it is part of the plan set, but it's only a reference plan, and it stands alone as the as-built for the site. We have a 3-sheet set, which is the layout, grading, and drainage, the details, and then a standalone stormwater management plan, SWEP plan, was generated for this project because going forward, there'll be a new way of managing all of the systems. Again, with your approval, Conservation has approved the project. A standalone SWEP plan was needed to pick up where the previous plan left off because there are new systems that are going to be in place.
So Karina, has a certificate of occupancy ever been issued?
For the current,
Well, the reason I ask is that if we never had as-bills, how do we even
Well,
get to the point?
let me say this, that the project was constructed before I started. What we have is an as-built from the prior site plan, and the Fuss and O'Neill comment number 20 alludes to the fact that, yes, we have an as-built that's stamped by a licensed surveyor. However, it is not, it was not reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill. I did a site visit and looked at some of the physical features I saw myself, for example, some of the landscaping around the property, the trees and such, but in fact, the as-built was not officially reviewed or accepted by the planning board. They must have a certificate of occupancy because they do operate the facility. From the time frame that happened was in May of 2016, was the decision of major site plan approval. I don't think at the time the certificate of occupancy was tied to the as-built. We do that now as a more common practice, but I don't see evidence that it was tied to that. The as-built was submitted as part of the property owner looking to increase the number of parking spaces he could use to store vehicles that he wanted to sell or resell. And when, at the beginning of the year, when I looked at the old site plan, you know, the owner was looking for 5 spaces. Well, they only had 2 extra spaces. So the Board of Selectmen told them that they could have 2 spaces. Go change your site plan through the planning board if you want more spaces, and then come back and we'll let you have 5 if you have that number in excess. So I received an as-built at that point. It was part of the Board of Selectmen's review process for whether they could have that license or not for selling more cars there or having spaces to sell cars. So when the as-built that Peter included in the plans as a reference was received, yes, it is a so-called as-built and it is stamped. But as Fuss and O'Neill indicates, there may be some features that were not built to site plan or missing. For example, some of the plantings that were supposed to be in the detention basin the original stormwater design, those plantings were not installed there. It appears that there is a cluster of plantings down on near the roadway, near Route 9 on the Framingham property line, actually in Framingham, that was planted, called out to be these detention basin plantings, but they didn't end up in the detention basin. So in talking with conservation, I had discussed with Melissa, what a good approach would be in this situation. And we thought that it might be considered acceptable if this site plan is approved, that they would follow up with a as-built of the current, what would be the current site plan approval, this modification.
So what concerns me is that it's not clear to me that the proponent actually conformed to what was approved in the first place. So am I missing something? Like if they're not actually in conformance, in conformity with the original site plan to begin with, shouldn't that be like our first priority in this review?
It could be, and maybe it should be. However, in noting that the modification was to put the detention underground, as opposed to leaving it, open air detention basin, that it was an improvement to the site. Not that it's my decision to make. And Mass DOT found that as an improvement as well, even though that they weren't tying directly into the Mass DOT drainage. It is into their outfall, into the same outfall as their system on their property. We just felt at this point, we meaning in conversation with conservation agent, that maybe the best way to move forward would be to require as a condition in this modification approval that a complete as-built be provided prior to something to hold a steadfast time so that we could assure that we get that as-built.
So this goes back to consistency and fairness and how we treat, in my experience, every proponent that comes in front of the planning board. If something like this comes to our attention, in my experience, this board has gone back and enforced what should have been in place in the first place. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Luttrell.
Thank you. Picking up where Mr. Stein left off, I see on the approved site plan, there was a stone wall that was to be built, and that's not on the as-built. Is that going to be built?
I had asked Peter to investigate that as part of his response to the as-built that he is using. And there were actually two conditions in the prior site plan approval. One was a stone wall along the southern border, or at least the southern perimeter. The applicant should replace the stone wall at the southern perimeter. Peter was going to confirm if that's the case. I, in my site visit, saw a stone wall the length of the perimeter there. I don't know if it was a replacement stone wall, but it looked like a relatively new stone wall. Then the second condition of the prior site plan approval was the applicant will build a wall on the east side near the drainage area and work with the abutter and with Boston Edison to regrade the southeast corner to divert drainage spillover back onto the Boston Edison property. It wasn't real clear to me on the information I had where exactly that was, if it was in the southeast corner where there is a pipe that runs from 10 Turnpike across there and towards Boston Edison. So I did see an old stone wall, stone boulders in the, vegetation that's grown there along the Framingham side of the property. Could that be the one I wasn't sure. So I queried Peter, and he was going to take a look at the site himself and tell me if in fact that was that condition, or what that meant, or where that stood. Peter, did you recognize anything?
Yeah, from my perspective, what I inspected was that I did indeed see the first one, the southern wall. That does appear to me to be present. That's the one you saw as well. I don't know how to find this other wall because it's vague. It's not explicitly defined in any way. And I don't know enough about the site because I didn't design it initially. So I'm a bit of a loss on the one that's this easterly wall. But I would state for the record that I did concur with Melissa and Karina when it came to an overall as-built for the site. We would be responsible going forward. We would do the work. We would provide an overall as-built that buttoned up all these open issues. And all I can say is that I'm sorry for them. I wasn't the author. I had no involvement in the project until it came up to this parking lot on the southeast side of the site. So that much I can tell you is going forward. Going forward, you'll get what you want. To the extent I can address the historical references, I will. And I just don't know about this second wall. The first one is definitely the one along the southern boundary. It's there. Thank you.
No, is there a stone wall indicated on the as-built that we have? Or I didn't see it, or did I miss it?
I don't, well, Peter, Peter, can you pull up the plan?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
This is the
So
as-built.
So you see that cluster of shrubs right there? That's the cluster of vegetation. At least the way it's labeled should have been in the detention basin. Should have been designed around should have been installed around, see, because it says stormwater plantings, inkberry and winterberry. So if you zoom out a little bit more and go to the bottom right corner of the property, you see what looks like a pipe running from 10 Turnpike to the south across the corner of the property and back into Boston Edison property. If you look along the property line right there, the line on the right is the Framingham town line. The line on the left is the property line for 6 to 8 Turnpike. In between there, I saw remnants or what appears to be a stone wall, stone boulders, almost like when you see on a scenic road, kind of cobbled together. But it's overgrown, and there is an outfall on the other side of that wall, I believe, which represents that the end of the pipe back into Boston Edison property. I don't understand that condition completely. So that's why I was looking to Peter to explain if he had spoken with Cornerstone.
Again, with Cornerstone, all I got was that this is the as-built for the site, and they really weren't going to have any more involvement with it, at least from their perspective. I know 10 Turnpike did have an inquiry regarding their drain pipe. There is no easement on 6 Turnpike for that drain line.
But you're talking about the one in the front. So they wanted to connect to the drain line in the front of your property. They want to tie to the manhole in the driveway at Route 9. That's the one they were talking about. I don't think it had to do with this one. I could be mistaken, but they're talking about along the front of the property.
Right. And again, as I said to you, that's a modification of their plan, and I didn't really want to be involved in anything to do with their project because they don't have an easement on our project, and the property owner at 6 Turnpike really didn't want to entertain anything other than his proposal, which should stand on its own merits and have nothing to do with 10 Turnpike.
So I guess in summary, the as-built is what we have an as-built. I don't have an engineer certifying letter that's required with an as-built. So I assume that this as-built was for that Board of Selectmen's purpose. I believe Attorney Galvani was the attorney representing the applicant at the time with the Board of Selectmen for the additional parking for car sales. So we have an as-built, but it hasn't been reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill. And that's the as-built that's being used as reference.
So my question is, if we approve this modification and we don't have an as-built that proves that the previous approval has been complied with, does that negate the conditions of the previous approval?
Typically, I can tell you that when I prepare a decision for a modification, one of the conditions is that all prior conditions still hold as applicable. So if there was a condition that said, you know, plantings in the detention basin need to be such and such, that wouldn't hold. But if it said a stone wall has to be built, then a stone wall is still required to be built. If a southern perimeter wall was required as a condition, that's still a condition of the site plan. And those get, I don't know if carried over is the right word, but I always add that condition that well, I try to include, you know, all prior conditions are still in full force.
Okay. All right. Then on to, just to be picky, the 3 to 3.5 inch pin oaks, it's, to be clear, caliper pin oaks, not
It's Cal.
3-inch trees.
I apologize on that one. I thought it said caliper. Yeah.
Also,
Three.
the maples, are they supposed to be 3 to 3.5 as well?
So they're being replaced, I think,
Right.
with pin oaks.
3 to 3.5 inch. You should have said
Well-
Cal.
Well, the current plan, Peter, still shows that the maples are 2 to 2.5.
Right.
I know I had said that was something that it went out inadvertently and was caught after, and I did provide an annotated plan, but I don't think you allow screen sharing, so I'll.
I looked at the plan, Peter, that you emailed, and it still has red maple at 2 and 2.5. The one you sent this afternoon still has the same. I just want you to know, I emailed you back.
Okay, I didn't.
All right.
All right,
So it's missing
That's
caliper
what
and
I'm
it
showing.
still has 2 to 2.5.
okay, fair enough.
And then there's a note that trees that are in the existing detention basin that can be properly uprooted and transplanted shall be. And if they can't be, can they be replaced?
Sure, I put that in there only because they were, I thought, transplantable. And as you had identified, all those that are planted along the common boundary would have probably been in the basin. So, you know, at least those are someplace else other than where we want to do this expansion. So I'm committed to that. So absolutely, if they don't take, we'll replace them. I'm fine with that condition.
Okay. And so although you explained the stormwater and it's more efficient, none of the lid techniques that are required to be utilized in our bylaw have been utilized on the site.
So again, that's where I was going with those overriding principles. You know, I try to read up a lot on lids so I understood it better. I mean, some of it's a philosophy. In many communities, that they emphasize that for like, you know, 5 or 6 principles and don't even talk about the physical attributes of stormwater. They just talk about, you know, making things easier and more palatable. Commonwealth of Massachusetts has their list, and I was pretty much reading from that. I think infiltration of stormwater is a smart growth technique. It's the one that's being implemented on this site, and by holding more water back and reducing the rate of runoff from the site, that is also a lid principle. Yeah, I'm not using a rain garden, and I'm not using a rain barrel, and I'm not using open channel flow. And I explained pretty much why I can't use those principles. I'm not allowed to tie into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Mass Highway system with open channel flow. They're just not going to allow it. So where I could make the changes, I did. And I'll just leave it to your better judgment as to whether this does it. Conservation did support our proposal. And I'll leave it to your judgment as to whether we do or we don't. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mrs. Houlihan.
I have no additional comments.
Okay. Very good questions from the board members, but at this point, in this submittal, we have spent way too much time on Zoom discussing inconsistencies on the plan, omissions, things that we don't understand. If this isn't fixed up and ready to go on the 27th of September, it's going to drag out, and it's going to continue to drag out until these omissions, these questions are clearly answered. My opinion, the revisions to the discharge that you made relative to lid are certainly a positive thing. Increasing the groundwater recharge, decreasing the flow rate and the volume. However, I think that you have calculations that would prove that, and they need to be reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill. But again, this is to me, this is unacceptable to continue meeting after meeting with plans we don't understand, with revisions, with errors that continue to be on these plans. Any questions from the public? Comments? We have a request for an extension of the approval period. It's been submitted and signed by you, Peter.
Yes, you have that in your file.
So we would entertain a motion to grant the request for an extension of the approval period. Can you get that on the screen, please?
The request for the extension request.
Yes.
Would you like me to read it, John?
Karina's
Yeah,
got it.
okay.
I didn't put it on the Dropbox.
Whatever will get us there quicker and more efficiently.
This is it right here. So we received a request for continuation extension of a public hearing for 6 to 8 Turnpike Road modification to major site plan approval. Most recent hearing this evening, September 13th. The above applicant or duly authorized representative hereby request and agree to the continuation of the above referenced hearings related to the above referenced matters with an extension of the planning board's time to reach a decision on such matters. The hearing shall be continued to September 27th, 2021 at 7:05 p.m. The time that the board shall have to reach a decision on the material matters shall be extended to October 1st, 2021, signed by Peter Bemis on September 9th, 2021.
So the 27th September is a Monday.
Correct.
And 1 October is the Friday following that Monday.
Yes.
This is the point in the meeting where we would entertain a motion to grant the request.
So moved.
Second for discussion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion, Mr. Stein.
So I can only think of one other time I've been on the planning board. I've reached like this level of concern. At least that's the only other one I can remember right now anyway. I'm just wondering if we don't have, if the differences between the as-built and the current submission aren't reconcilable, where are we going with this? Do the proponent and Karina have like some kind of path forward in that context?
Well, I can speak to the fact that I don't have any official agreement. It was conversation. My impression was that if this site plan modification is approved, that a condition would address the Fuss and O'Neill comment number 20, which would require a complete as-built showing that all the conditions applicable from the original site plan and the conditions set for this modification would be included in the as-built. In other words, conditions that relate to physical features. So my thought was that the as-built would, the final as-built, the overall as-built would be the final as-built for the project, but it would be conditioned in this modification with a set time frame. It would be tied to something because they're already operating there.
Can I suggest that the proponent come back with a list of those conditions and things that are not conditioned, but part of the original design that cannot be accomplished if this modification is approved? For example, the original approval approved a design of a detention basin. The new modification is requesting that the detention basin not be built and that in its place would be parking spaces. And as a result of that, there'd be modifications to the stormwater. So a list of those things under the original approval that cannot be built, and a list relative to conditions that either are completed or will not be completed because they can't be, so that we can match those up and satisfy the board that anything and everything that was part of the original approval that can be built will be built and reflected on the as-built drawings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In that context, I support the extension. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes?
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
See you on the
Thank you very
27th.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a
Right,
continued
right.
pub.
Do we have to continue the public hearing now?
Oh, sorry about that. You can tell I'm a little bit sideways.
Yeah, Make a motion.
Mr. Mills,
Make a motion, we continue the public hearing for 6 and 8 Turnpike Road modification major site plan to September 27th at 7:05 PM.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Karina, the 7:05, we also have two other, or one, at least one other. We have Ken's. Is there a time that's been listed for that yet?
Yes, so Ken's will be starting at 7:20 PM.
Okay, so
because we still
7:05,
have to-
7:05 is not a conflict.
No, we checked that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to continue the public hearing to 27 September at 7:05. Any more discussions, questions? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes?
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay. Have I missed anything on this yet?
Oh, I don't
Still,
think,
still? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Continued public hearing, proposed downtown district bylaw, zoning map and design guidelines. This is a public hearing that's been continued since, from July 19th and August 16th. There's more than a little bit of updating on the status of things that have happened since August, things that have happened or haven't happened since August 16th. I'll probably ask the town planner to give us what she knows about updates, but the public is reminded that this, although the planning board because it's a proposed zoning article, the planning board is the board responsible for conducting the public hearing. The proposed bylaw has been so far sponsored by the Board of Selectmen and the EDC. And of course, I think both parties are interested in having the planning board fully support this effort at the fall town meeting. Not at that point yet, because we still have more information that the board needs before we render our opinion. So I'll ask the town planner to give us an update, and then piece of this needs to be discussed by Mrs. Luttrell also.
All
Karina.
right, so I'll do kind of the general summary of where we are now. So the last public hearing, which was public hearing number 2, was on August 16th, which was continued to this evening, September 13th. On August 27th, the working group that is working on the design guidelines, spearheaded by Lisa Braccio, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, working with Julie Connolly, Mimi Luttrell, Lisa Braccio. Sarah actually facilitates the internal meetings through Zoom. Was also attended by Michael Weishan from the Historic Commission, and then Judy Barrett, the EDC or Board of Selectmen's consultant, who's been working on the bylaw, also attended the design guidelines, which are currently based on, they're using the Northborough design guidelines as a basis. They were found to be more suitable for the Southborough than the Hopkinton one that the original design guidelines were formed on, which if you look in the documents that are available online, you'll see a November 2021 version. Don't be confused. That was the very original set of design guidelines. Those are relatively obsolete, I believe, right now. So the working group is planning on having another meeting, I believe tentatively this Wednesday, to go over that information. A couple things I just want to point out quickly here is that in summary, the warrant article as it's drafted still does not include a motion to amend the zoning map in accordance with section 174-4 of the town code, which should be addressed within the warrant article for a motion. If the bylaw gets adopted, the zoning map does need to be updated regardless of if the boundary changes or not. The Board of Selectmen is having a meeting on October 5th at which they plan to sign the warrant and have it ready for printing for the special town meeting November 1st. So the planning board will most likely continue the public hearing process, but the bylaw that goes to Board of Selectmen on October 5th will be the one that gets printed in the warrant. I want to point out that in the current downtown district draft bylaw that's currently in front of the planning board, that there's a section G5 that relates to affordable units. And early on, we noticed there was a term in there that was discussed about the planning board interpreting 40B to address that in the design guidelines. And I believe the planning board at that time had said that they don't interpret 40B. So that line should have been stricken. Also, there was a newsletter from the EDC that was distributed for August 2021, which explains the status of the proposed bylaw, the zoning map, boundaries, etc. I just want to point out that there was reference to me speaking to the split lots, and that it wasn't actually representative of what I had said. I think there was a misunderstanding saying that there was never an issue with split lots. Maybe that was just because they thought I was talking about the business village district, because if you recall 118 to 120 Turnpike, where that project wanted to increase parking into the residential zone from the business highway, and they were restricted because you can only go 30 feet in. So they came back with a parking garage design. So that was clearly a demonstration of something I witnessed while here in my last 4.5 years here. And I also, there's no way I can say that there's never been an issue with since the zoning code has been adopted. I don't have history that far back. So I think that was just poor wording on the part of the newsletter. So I just wanted to point that out. So that brings us here tonight to continue discussion. There was some implication that Julie Connolly from the EDC had discovered or had found that there were some facts in the renderings that the architects had prepared for the EDC when they wanted to show like the FAR, or if you were to build out a lot, there was some discrepancies there. And those were hopefully to be vetted here during the public hearing process with the planning board. And those are the only topics and issues that I have on my list to be aware of and concerned with right now. Sorry
Thank
about the
you.
long sentence.
Thanks, Karina.
You're welcome.
Did you want to go, Mimi? You're on that, the design subgroup.
I am. Karina did a very good job
Oh, I'm sorry.
giving the updates. Oh, no, that's great. Yeah, so we did meet on the 27th. And each of us was assigned a section to edit and to make the guidelines unique to Southborough and to Southborough's downtown. And I think everybody submitted those and Sarah pulled them all together. So we're hoping to meet on Wednesday to just go over and finalize what we have. That's all I have.
Very good, thank you. So I guess we'll open it up to,
John, can I add one more thing? I'm sorry.
sure, yeah,
Just because I don't want it to go too far because it was part of what I was supposed to say. I just want to also point out that I received a phone call from Sylvia Morrow, 25 Park Street, regarding wanting to locate where the Weston Sampson study was for this downtown sewer. So I was able to point that out to her to go look at the EDC website to see those documents. They have them listed there. And then number two, we received an email from, hold on, Michael Weishan back on August 19th with his concerns for changes to the historic district, also in regards to the downtown being nominated for the National Registry of Historic Places. In the interim, Michael Weishan has attended the working group meetings to provide input to them as far as the details of the design guidelines. And then we also received an email from Ray Hokinson, 10 Main Street. It was Sunday, September 12th, so I got this morning. And it's a letter linking the Southborough Center National Register Historic District, the Urban Land Institute report, and the Downtown Center warrant article. On Wednesdays, in part, it said that on Wednesday, September 8th, the Massachusetts Historical Commission approved in a unanimous vote Southborough Center nomination as a National Register Historic District and forward that approval to the federal level for final processing, among other things. So I just wanted you to be aware that those are the documents we received in correspondence from residents and abutters as well, so they're not ignored.
so I guess we'll open it up, thank you, we'll open it up to anyone who has any proposed revisions to what we have so far.
Don't see any hand. Oh, there they go.
Thank you.
Claire, you're all
Hi.
set.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Claire. Welcome.
Thank you. Karina, could you just explain a little bit more? You said that the EDC August 21 newsletter explains that the status of the bylaw and the zoning map boundaries, and you referenced, and I can't quite figure it out, maybe if you can just explain it a little clearer, that it was not quite what you had as an understanding, I think. I don't know, my screen just
Oh, sure. If
flipped.
you look
Okay,
on
thank
page
you.
5, if you look on page 5 of the EDC newsletter.
Yep.
Right under the block that has a section 174-5, see the first paragraph. It says, as confirmed by the Southborough town planner, the existence of split lots has never raised concerns. I try to avoid the words never because that's rarely the case. I wouldn't know if they've raised concerns in the downtown district, but I know that split lots have had issues with them. Specifically, I noted the 118, 120. I also made mention to a property which wasn't necessarily a split lot, but someone who wanted to change their zoning because he was abutting. the
So
town.
essentially, is it fair to say that either you haven't had an issue with split lots since you've been here, but
No, that's
that-
not true.
That's not true, Claire.
That's not
okay,
true. I have, and then,
If you narrow it down to downtown split lots and ask that question of this town planner who's been here for 4.5 years, you get
okay,
a different answer.
okay.
yeah, and
So
then
in other
also
words,
the
you had,
implication of the neither has it created any conflict since Southborough adopted the zoning code. I don't know if that was meant to say that that was my response or if that's another individual thought. So the paragraph just made me feel a little uncomfortable because it made it sound like I'm saying these things and they're very open, wide, all encompassing like statements. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
okay, so I'm still not clear on it.
Okay.
Not-
No.
and the reason that I'm asking this is because this information has to exist someplace. If there has been an issue in the past of split lots, one in the downtown area, or two in any of the other districts within the town where split lots already exist and have existed.
What are you asking?
I said, is it fair to say that there is documentation that the existence of split lots has either been raised in the downtown area or in any of the other districts within the town where split lots exist?
I myself have experienced an issue with split lots and the
So you
fact
would
that-
be able to provide that documentation?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay,
I
all
think-
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
for that one I can.
Claire, I'm not sure if that's of much value because
Well, here's the
They-
reason that I'm asking it, Don.
they were resolved. They were resolved. For example, if my memory's right, when Long Cadillac was the site plan for Long Cadillac was proposed, that's a split lot, and it was resolved. It was taken care of. It was
Okay,
and
so
the
that's
project was built.
specifically why I'm asking the question, is because the whole issue of split lots, specifically with the downtown area, as far as I can remember, has never really come up until just recently.
And I would agree with that. I've been on the board for a while, and
Yeah.
I don't recall
That's fair. No.
issues downtown with those split lots. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else with questions or proposed changes?
Yes, we have a couple more folks who'd like to speak. We have Ray Wilkinson.
Can you hear me?
Good evening, Ray.
Hello, this is Ray Hokinson from 10 Main Street. I have an issue on sort of the report itself, or the warrant article, the zoning issue that I worked through today. It's on the size of, let me get my notes here. Where are they? Okay, it's on the size of the mixed use development, the size of the commercial space. And so I'm going to answer that. There's sort of conflicting data in the way it's written, I think. I worked out an example and I just want to raise it. Regarding briefly, just as I follow up on the last discussion, our biggest problem over the past 30 years with the downtown village district and zoning is TEDS. All right, TEDS is a split lot. TEDS has been a nightmare, period, across the board. And TEDS right now, again, is violating their zoning. And we've actually had they're gone, but they're still doing things down there, storing things inappropriately, not on their property. So it is a split lot. And it's TEDS, but I'm not sure it's because of the split lot. It's just because of a split lot owner. Okay, so I'll just add that comment. So what it involves the two things. First of all, at the end, the sort of border of page 1 and page 2, when it's talking about mixed use development, there's the comment that the ground floor facing the street, commercial only, must be a 10% minimum of the gross floor area. We've already had that as an issue. And as a sort of a follow-on, this is a bit of a dangling item that came up in one of the first items, and it's sort of an issue that, the other issue that I have is making sure that if we've defined items or issues that we have some sort of closure on that. I don't know that we necessarily have that closure. And on the 10% issue, we've all noted that if 10%, a minimum of a building is 10%, then the flip side of that is 90% of it is residential. And is this really the warrant article we expected to see, which was to promote business development in the village center? So it's kind of the flip side of that. Worse than that, when I went through and I worked out a particular example, and I used my house, I just said, well, let's assume that I'm a business. And I grabbed a rough number for my house, which is 30 feet by 30 feet. Not any extension or anything, but the original 1840 Greek Revival square that the house was built around. It's roughly 30 feet by 30 feet. And so I drew the picture out 30 feet by 30 feet. And on the top of page 5 in the design specs, section G, building requirements 3, there's a statement saying that the maximum depth of street level commercial space, meaning the front of the building that is supposed to be commercial space on a mixed use development, it's the lesser of 30 feet or 60% of the depth of the building. Okay, well, the numbers that I'm using are 30 by 30. I can't use the entire first floor of that space as a commercial. This is hypothetical, obviously, but I can't use all 30 feet of the first floor. I'm restricted to the front 18 feet of that building. So there's another 12 feet in the back of the building that I can't use for commercial space if I was to make my existing house a business. And so if you take that number through all the way, and so that 18 feet, okay, that 18 feet, and then if I then figure, okay, I've got 3 stories and everything, and I work it through, I get a maximum of 20%. So the maximum on a 3-story building that I could have on my space is 20%, and the minimum is 10%. So I think it's a funny thing that I can't use my entire first floor as business space. They're actually putting a maximum on that. And don't understand why there should be a maximum. I should be able to use the entire first floor minus maybe, yeah, so that item is page 5 at the top, section G, part of building requirements, item 3. There it is. So I'm talking about a 30 by 30 feet space, and they're sort of restricting that space, that I can't use all 30 feet. I can only use 60% of the depth of the building. That's the maximum that I can use as commercial space. So I find that a little bit odd in that it's counterintuitive. I'm thinking that if we're supposed to have a mixed use business and the first floor is supposed to be business, why isn't the first floor all business? And it sort of goes back and forth between, you know, that 20% maximum, 10% minimum. Why isn't it 33 1/3 on a 3-story building? And then the rest of the numbers all sort of work out that if I turn around and take that and take a look at the, what is the, I can't remember the mnemonic here for the floor ratio. Sort of my house pretty much winds up being about the size of the lot. So if I've got a building about the size of my house, I need to put it in a lot that's roughly the size of my current property. So just that number, if I'm going to create a 30 by 30 foot space, I need roughly a 1/3 of an acre to 0.4 acres to have that business, based multiplying through the rest of the numbers in the document. So I find that a little bit concerning that, you know, if we're supposed to be encouraging businesses, that we're actually restricting the size of the first floor and actually sort of forcing part of the first floor to be residential. Seems counterintuitive to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now what I'll do, just because it's a
Excuse
little
me.
bit complicated, what I
Ray,
thought
can you
I'd
hear
do
me?
is yep,
I'd like
Sorry.
to, at this point, ask you, to solve that, would you recommend deleting item G3?
that would solve it. I mean, I could use the whole 30 feet, just hypothetically. Or, you know, I haven't worked on other sort of geometries here. I've started off with squares because it's easy.
Well, if it doesn't work for some buildings, which would necessarily be one building, which is yours, then there's something defective. And I'm looking at this and saying, if this section is removed, if number 3 is removed, how does that impact, you know, the rest of it?
Well, I think 3 needs to be cleaned up, and I would say one solution of that, I don't know what type of overhead would be needed in a building to accommodate access to the 2nd and 3rd floors. So it's some sort of factor there. 60% seems a somewhat arbitrary number, you know, because all you really need is some sort of stairwell that would allow you access up to upper floors on a mixed-use building. So if they cleaned it up that way, in some way that in that regard, maybe instead of 60%, maybe it's 90% of the building or something to, or at least to allow, you know, the space just for access to the upper levels, some foyer, some stairwells or something. It just needs to be cleaned up. So those numbers don't seem to work out in this one particular case.
Ray, I see Mrs. Luttrell has her hand up. If it's okay with you, we'll let her, and then we'll come back to you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mimi.
So I agree with Ray that that's awkwardly written. The intention was, according to to Judy Barrett, the consultant, was to encourage small businesses and not have like a CVS or something that takes up the whole depth of the building. If you limit the size, it encourages smaller buildings, but I would think it would be like per establishment or something, not the entire commercial space of the bottom floor.
Okay, back to you, Ray.
Yeah, the only thing I'll do is I'll try to just work through these numbers and I'll just zing an email off to Corinne or something to just document. She can forward it to the planning board, just so you can see my numbers and what I worked out. Kind of hard to describe, but I did find that, that there is it's a maximum in my case of 20%, a minimum of 10%, and I think it should be closer to 33%. So that's sort of, I think, and I can understand the big building issue, but the big building gets triggered with the planning board review. Something over a certain size requires the planning board size. So maybe that covers that. I'm not sure. Actually, it's a much larger size than my first floor anyway. So that was that. I guess my only other issue is to just make sure that there is some sort of system for closing on some sort of open items. And 2 open items from past meetings. Well, one of them is just this example, and it was that 10% minimum commercial space. That was an open item. And I did request early on at the first meeting that, I think it was Claire Reynolds, who said that there was some sort of memo documenting the benefit to the business or either the appraised value of the downtown businesses, trying to say that somewhere along the line, somebody should work through a mathematical model showing that if you do the sort of build out allowed by this zoning, what's the impact? What's the benefit to the town, quantitatively? That was a request in the first meeting. And I'd really like to see some sort of demonstration quantitatively that all this is for the benefit of the town, as opposed to for the benefit of a few builders. That was an open item, and I'd just like to make sure that we don't lose track of those open items and we close on them. That was it on details. I can have one other one that's all slightly off. It doesn't go directly towards the details of the document. And I'm waiting for permission.
Ray,
It'll be
you're
quick.
on.
It'll be
No.
really quick. It'll be really
No,
quick.
go ahead.
It really, Kate Burke and I have been discussing, like, how are we, getting to the people? Are we getting to the people? So both of us have asked for sort of an attendees list. And I think this is really, I see this as an open meeting. And as an open meeting of the town, we sort of get measured by how well we're getting our message out. And a lot of times in this town, you don't know there's an issue unless you trip over it accidentally. And a lot of times I don't see things until 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after, and then somebody mentions it to me in passing. So in a way, the attendance at this meeting and the making sure that the attendance is good across the village residents, that's sort of a metric of how well we're doing at getting the information out. So I do think it's important. And also because I, attended the Zoom meeting for the Mass Historic Commission on Wednesday, where the Southborough Historic District was reviewed. And it was a Zoom meeting. There were 40, 45, 50 people. Everybody had a box, even though everybody's camera wasn't on, but everybody who logged into the Zoom sort of at least had a box with their name on it. And I could at least skim through the boxes and say, oh, I recognize that name. I recognize that name. You got a better feel for who was there. And this is across the whole state. So I just, at least I encourage you guys to at least taking some sort of attendance or a snapshot to make sure that we're getting, and maybe you don't make that public, but even for your own sense that we're reaching the people that we need to. And I want to make sure that we're reaching the people in the village to make sure, because we're going to live with this. Okay, that's it. Unless something triggers later.
Oh, sure, we can come back to you. Thank you. And who's next? Anybody?
Yep, next is Kevin Miller. Kevin, you all set?
This isn't Kevin, unless you meant to unmute Kevin.
Looks like it's a Tim.
Yes, Tim had his hand raised as well. I guess, Tim, you go ahead and we'll get to Kevin after you.
Perfect. This is Tim Fling, 18 Main Street. I wanted to bring up about the floor area coverage, the floor area ratio for the coverage of the buildings, and brought it up on a previous meeting to see if there was going to be renders that we were hoping to do with the remainder of the grant money. I don't remember seeing any renders of what that would look like on different lots, but I'm wondering if it's still the right kind of measurement for a smaller lot. It kind of seems like it would encourage skyscraper style buildings if you would build to 3 stories on a smaller lot. So I was wondering if that's the right thing for a smaller lot, if it should be different than if it should be split up by sizes of a property by acreage. So just bringing that one back forward.
Karina, anything new on that?
No, I recall that there is, at one of the prior meetings, either Claire or someone from the EDC indicated that those were posted on the EDC website. There was either included in one of the EDC newsletters or a separate document showing, I believe I even saw part of it in my Southborough.com email that I get daily weeks ago, showing a building build out, and there was examples of that. I just need to recall where that was. Perhaps Claire or someone from the EDC could point us where that document is. I do recall seeing it. We don't, and we may have posted it with our hearing documents on one of the, either the first meeting, most likely, or the second meeting. So I'm sorry, I have to find that out. Sarah, if you recall where that was, do you have any recall? Okay,
Sorry, I don't.
but we can find it. if
Yeah, put
someone
it on the
needs
list,
Okay,
please.
I think it is on the EDC website, but it's earlier renderings prior to this particular bylaw. It was part of the package that they sent out to homeowners.
yes, and it actually showed like the, the box size, a box of the building on a particular lot size with the frontage and all that, right? I'm gonna look through my information right now as you guys keep talking.
Let's go on to Kevin.
Yep, Kevin, you're all set whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Board, and thank you for having me. I wanted to go back to the first comment that was made when you were taking comments by, I'm not sure if that was coming from the EDC or not from the EDC, but the demand that Corinna now document that there haven't been problems with split lots because she doesn't want to be misrepresented in EDC. It's very confusing to me, but I want to cut through the smoke. And happily, we have the answer to this. And I'm very thankful to the Planning Board for embracing the idea. And I understand that it's Sarah that has done the mock-ups that exist in your packet for this evening. And if I may, I'd like to address these mock-ups for amending the map, if I may.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you want to bring them up on screen. I have them myself, so I can just refer to, but it might be helpful to people in the audience.
Yep, we're working on bringing those up. Thanks.
Okay. Number one is, it's a little hard for me to see on my screen here. It's rather small. Yeah. The mock-up including, is that the first one that I'm seeing now? Yeah, number one is the mock-up proposed DD, including all split lots and 15 Main Street per homeowner request. And that's interesting to see, of course, completely would be absurd. Putting, for instance, I believe that would be 10, 12, and 14 Lattisquama, subject to, for instance, demolition, and somebody could build a nice Applebee's on those 3 contiguous lots. So that's not going to happen. Number 3, including all the split lots, again, interesting but crazy. Number 4, including only split lots at 5 and 25 Park.
Excluding.
Including only, that's number 4. I'm skipping ahead to number 4, including only split lots in 5 and 25 Park. Again, the inclusion of 25 Park is actually crazy. And there's actually an error there because that rendering also includes the CSX parcel. That's a 1-acre lot. That's actually, it's 25 Park does not run along the train track, but the CSX parcel does. So 25 Park is buffered from the railroad tracks by the very slender, almost like a sliver of CSX property. That's where Falcone parks their trucks on the west side of the tracks. But happily, and I'm again very grateful to Sarah for her efforts here, you have the solution in my mind in map number 2 on page 2. This is the one that the mock-up of proposed DD excluding all split lots. And the illustration actually includes all split lots as well as that wafer thin CSX parcel, which is between 25 Park and the tracks itself. That's the parcel ID number on that CSX parcel. If you, for instance, were to look at the GIS maps online, it's parcel 5592. 25 Park is parcel 5593. So the map on page 2, labeled mock-up or proposed DD excluding all split lots, excludes the 7 split lots, 10, 12, and 14 Lattisquama, 5 Park, 35 Boston Road, 2 Foley Drive, which is a silly one where the lot line actually, or the district line cuts through the poor fellow's swimming pool, 25 Park, that's the 7 split lots. And that rendering also includes the CSX parcel, which I think there is the strongest possible argument by the logic of the illustration itself to exclude that parcel as well. I don't see any reason why CSX needs to be rewarded with by right zoning. So your answer, and it's an excellent one, it protects the integrity of not only Lattisquama Road, but all my friends and neighbors on Foley Drive, Peggy Drive, Birchwood Drive, and McNeil Drive. It's sensitive to what, my neighbor Ray Hokinson has talked about in an earlier call concerning the stability and protection of the residential neighborhood. It doesn't impinge whatsoever upon the goals along Main Street and Newton and Boston Road. And it also, of course, by leaving those parcels in the existing district that they're in would involve no abridgment whatsoever of their rights. And that's been a an issue. I was a little mystified by that earlier comment of why document for us why there's there's never been any problem with split lots in this district. Well, golly gee, there hasn't. And you know why? Because there never was a proposal linking it to by right zoning before. I mean, it's just, can we cut the silliness on that? And again, here we are towards the end of a very long and vexing road for all of us. And I'm so delighted to see the embrace of a sensible approach to the mapping. I think, this proposal still has a lot of problems hanging fire. If it were a well thought out proposal, we wouldn't still be talking about it at the 11th hour. But the one thing that I've been, chirping about for many, many months, you now have the solution that's come forward through some people, very smart people on planning and with the help of Sarah, and you have the solution in front of you. And I think you could take a vote on it tonight and put this one issue to bed, because I think it's clearly map 2, excluding all split lots, is clearly the solution here. And I would urge you to move forward. Before I yield, I would just like to say one other thing about this whole proposal. I mean, there's a lot of obviously stuff still hanging fire, the lot coverage, the design guidance, a floor area ratio, a $4 million wastewater treatment plant with no estimate of what it's going to cost to run it. As Mr. Hokanson touched on earlier, no hard data on what the actual economic benefit to the town would be to balance out all this expense. But I want to set that all aside, because I think there are good minds at work on those issues, and maybe they'll get worked out and maybe they won't. What I want to engage you with, a planning board, is the philosophical question that I've kind of been wrestling with this and this whole issue is that, we've got an elected planning board, and I happen to hold this planning board in very high regard and have a great deal of respect for your many, many years, in some cases, decades of experience in this field, as a very sober-minded, thoughtful group, elected and therefore accountable to voters. I don't understand why ultimately, and this was with all due respect for your desire to work well with other boards and commissions, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't know why the planning board would not choose to politely say, no, thank you to this whole thing and to by right zone it. Because I frankly appreciate the discretionary review of the planning board in its traditional function. And I am very concerned, the downtown district, we're talking about a very small area of town. And it is in fact, arguably, not only quite small, but historically significant, economically critical, and to the identity of the entirety of Southborough, the sort of linchpin of the whole town. And I want the planning board overseeing development proposals down there. I don't want a sort of these criteria created, and as long as you satisfy them, you're in, and the planning board doesn't get to exercise its traditional discretionary review. And I just don't, I think that if the planning board said at the end of the day, hey, guess what? No thank you on by right zoning, you would get support from the vast majority of the citizens of this town who say, if there's somebody wants to put something in, let's say at the corner of Main and Newton, let's have the planning board review it, consider it, and just as you did earlier in this meeting tonight, hold the developer's feet to the fire in detail and make sure they get every last thing correct before it goes sailing through. And I am really reluctant, just as a matter of philosophy, to sign off on a proposal that would eliminate planning board oversight, just as long as you meet this pre-established kind of criteria that clearly at the 11th hour are still not established. And so that's my thought on that. Now, you know, that you can take that as just a thought from the peanut gallery and go back to the idea that the one thing that you can definitively resolve as early as tonight, if you so choose, is the map, because you've got a good solution brought forward, from the planning board to this problem of the map. And I would urge you to solve that issue tonight, but also to consider very seriously the support you would have in the community by just very politely and respectfully and with appreciation for all the effort that's been expended, saying no to this. If the most compelling argument the EDC has is that they've spent $160,000 in grant money studying this, and that seems to be the strongest remaining argument, I just don't think this should go forward at all. And I thank you very much for your time and indulgence of me tonight and on previous meetings. And again, I have much respect for the planning board and support you in your traditional functions. And I think you could do this one thing tonight and consider saying no to the whole thing later on. And thanks very much.
Thank you. Before we finish up with tonight's public hearing, we're going to have a little, I'm going to ask the board, we have we need to develop or continue on our plan to get this process completed from the planning board's point of view. Again, we remind the public that this is an article brought forward by the selectmen and the EDC. So if the board were to take any type of a vote tonight, which I would recommend against, it's just a recommendation from the board relative to the article getting improved, moving forward, or being pulled. So if you can just hang on, we'll take any more questions and comments, and then I want to get into what I would recommend as our path forward toward the October 5th Selectmen's meeting to get the warrant article, the warrant printed for the November 1st meeting. And I'm not sure how many more people want to speak, but if Mr. Miller, if you had any more details on how much you respect and like the planning board, we could listen to those at this time. Sarah, any more hands up?
We do. We have 5 more hands up. Next up is Kate Burke. Y'all set, Kate?
Yep, I'm all set. And my
you.
name is Kate. My name is Kate Burke, and I am a resident at 14 Birchwood Drive. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am opposed completely to the zoning change and opposed to the project as presented. My biggest concern is that all parties are mixing multiple interested long-term improvements to the town into one project, and that has created complications for many of us abutters to the project. There has been no financial analysis that's been presented or any reasoning to suggest that the commercial development that we were hoping to see in the downtown would come to fruition. And there seems also to be, from all of the initial drawings, a significant housing focus that's buried in this zoning proposal, that if this is really what we're talking about, maybe this needs to be scrapped and we can kind of start from scratch again and put all our cards on the table. And I appreciate the opportunity to leave my public comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Marika.
Good evening, everyone. Marijke Munsef, 92 Sears Road. I'm also the EDC coordinator.
Welcome back, Marijke. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually have a lot of comments, but I will start with, because Kevin Miller brought up made a lot of comments and suggestions, I think, which are not entirely, truthful. I mean, I don't mean to say that he's not trying to be truthful, but the EDC started this whole process, working from the 2008 master plan. We looked at not just EDC money that we spent, but that the town of Southborough spent many different departments on, housing production plans, other studies that all recommend allowing for mixed use. And that's how this started. In 2000, I think it was 2018, I remember Julie Connolly proposed adding mixed use to the business village district. That was not approved by the planning board, and the EDC was actually requested to come back with a draft zoning bylaw for just downtown Southborough that would allow for mixed use. And then the statement was that we will work with you to finalize that. So that's how we got started. The intention of the downtown district bylaw is to allow for mixed use, to update the permitted uses, and to streamline the permitting process to allow for certain desirable by right uses. So Mr. Miller, if anybody wants to do anything on that empty lot in downtown, they will have to go through planning board review, site plan review. Any construction, any development that will happen or that people want to do in downtown will have to go through the planning board. So by right zoning is thrown around a lot, but it's not correct. The only by right zoning is for specific uses, meaning you don't need a separate permit for those identified uses, for instance, an office use or other commercial use. So that's one. The proposed downtown district was never intended to alter the commercial boundaries of a district. And this whole discussion, I know we've been talking about the map for a long, long time, which is fine, but I don't think it's part of this downtown proposal. And that's why the split lots came up. We haven't heard from actual split lot owners. We've only heard from Kevin Miller, who's in a butter. I spoke to split lot owners. I mean, it would be nice to hear from them. I know what they told me, but so that's another thing. And what I apologize, Karina, for not putting it more clearly. But the reason, we want to know if there has been any conflict with split lots in Southborough, is because if there has, then why not address split lots in Southborough? Why only focus on the downtown area? There are split lots on Route 9. There are split lots in other business villages. So if the split lots are a problem, then address them separately. I mean, there are too many things that have been attached to the zoning bylaw, and we just need to focus on the actual bylaw. I just wanted to make one more comment. Mr. Ray Hokinson made a good point about the 10% commercial requirement. I know Julie Connolly had requested from Lisa Braccio to amend the bylaw. There's some confusion in what the process should be, if it should go through planning board, public hearings, and try to, give you those changes, or if we should ask the Board of Selectmen to propose a next version with those changes, because that issue has been ongoing, and everyone involved in writing the bylaw agrees that that's problematic, and that's not what the intention of the bylaw is. So I think everyone agrees that the ground floor is supposed to be commercial, or at least for a mixed use building. So anyway, that's all I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sylvia.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Sylvia Morrow, and I'm part owner of one of the split lots, which is located at 25 Park Street, which is going to be potentially affected by the rezoning. And I'm here to speak on behalf of all of the owners of this property and our desires regarding the possible new zoning. First, I want to thank the board for your time and your attention on this important matter and the exciting idea of renovating and making a better downtown district for the town. To give a little background about our property for those in town who may not be aware of the history, it is rather unique. 25 Park Street has been in the Morrow family for over 100 years. It was purchased by my great-grandparents in the early 1900s, and the property started as a dairy farm. And at that time, Peggy and Foley Drive were part of that farmland. Additionally, there used to be a right-of-way that was granted from the farm up onto Lattisquama Road, as well as a right-of-way that has been granted by the railroad to access the end of Park Street. In the 70s, my grandfather sold some of the land to a developer, and with that, the lovely divisions of Peggy and Foley Drive, those neighborhoods were created. I give the history because we believe this piece of property is unique in how it was subdivided by the town many years ago, and to express that it has a meaningful history to our family. I also want to say that we're very mindful of our friends and neighbors, both on Lattisquama Road, as well as Peggy Drive, Foley Drive, and Birchwood Drive. Family members still live at the property at 25 Park Street, and we enjoy the quaint neighborhood and the friendly feel. Currently, we see many of those very neighbors enjoying the ability to cut through our property to access the downtown area. We recognize it's a great shortcut and keeps them from needing to walk all the way down Lattisquama. And we plan to explore options with the town that would allow that to continue. With that, our wishes are to have 25 Park Street become part of the downtown district. So when we're talking about the maps, I think that actually was map number 4. We're not looking to become a big commercial spot. Quite the contrary, we would love to keep it residential, or if possible, create something that only enhances what we see our neighbors currently enjoying. Our family, the Morrow family, has given back to the town in many ways, and we hope to continue with that legacy in some manner with this property. So with that, I thank you for your time, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Julie Connolly now. Julie.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Julie Connolly. I'm at 26 Granuel Road, also a member of the EDC. And I wanted to actually make a couple of proposals to the current draft of the zoning bylaw, a couple of changes. I think one, and I apologize because I was only able to hop on this meeting about 15 minutes ago, so I may have missed some discussion. But it sounds like at some point the issue of the 10% gross floor area was discussed. So the first proposal that I wanted to offer up is in the definition of mixed use on the first page of the draft zoning bylaw. And I proposed that the words "and the total gross floor area occupied by non-residential uses shall be at least 10% of the gross floor area of the structures." I propose that that clause be struck so that the result would be that the language would say the ground floor facing the street shall be used only for permitted non-residential uses. So again, this is not, the intent of the zoning bylaw is not a housing bylaw. The EDC does not have interest in housing for housing's sake in the downtown. We want commercial activity, and as the priorities of both the state government and as have been set forth in the master plan, mixed use is part of that. So as Marika mentioned, and as we've stated many times, the initial catalyst for making the zoning bylaw changes, the most significant purpose of the changes we wanted to make was to allow for mixed use, meaning commercial space on a ground floor with a residential space over it. The current bylaw allows for up to 3 stories total. So that would be commercial commercial space on the ground floor, and then on second and third floor, I believe it would allow potentially office space on the second floor, but or residential and residential on the third floor. So my first proposal is to strike that language just to clarify that, yes, this is commercial space that we want on the ground floor. We say street facing, so just for clarity's sake, the reason that we say street facing is obviously when we're thinking about a robust and vibrant downtown, we want commercial space to be street facing. This would potentially permit a unit, again, we're very limited on space, but perhaps behind a commercial space. It would potentially allow for for residential space on the backside. And the reason that we think that it would be appropriate to leave it that way is to allow potentially for handicap accessibility and use of a ground floor apartment potentially. But again, anything street facing, absolutely, we want that to be non-residential use. We want that commercial use. So that's my first proposed change. My second proposed change is in, hold on, Part 4, section 174-8.12, A, B, C, D, F sub 6. That section says that that provides minimum landscaped green space of 20%, which is fine. At least 50% of the landscaped open space in front of the building. So if we're thinking about, looking at the front entrance of a building from the street, it says shall be contiguous and located between the front building line and the front lot line, unless the planning board approves a different placement, which is fine. I wanted to propose striking the words contiguous and the reason that I wanted to propose that, we are very interested in having green space and having large swaths of green space. But when we started, we were working with an architect just to sort of, see what this bylaw would actually look like. I know people have commented, oh, we put together renderings, but do the renderings actually match what the bylaw says? So we said, what, let's update that now that we have some metrics that we can put in there. And one of the comments from the architect was that contiguous green space prevents allowing pedestrian walkways from a sidewalk to the front entrance of a building. And so having it contiguous actually conflicts with another section, which requires that there be entrances, entrances in the front cannot be spaced that far apart depending on the size. So, so I propose we strike the words contiguous and. My third proposal, and I know we've spoken a lot about the FAR, the floor area ratio, and it's something that I've thought about quite a bit because I think, I've heard a lot of the different arguments and I think everybody wants the same thing. I think we're really, when we're thinking about this, the people who want a more restrictive FAR are not far off from the people who want to do away with the FAR. And for those who are listening and just for a quick context, and I'll try to do this quickly, the floor area ratio is the amount of square feet as a ratio of the building. So every floor of the building as compared to the square footage of the land that it's on. We've spoken about this a lot with our zoning consultant who has tried to convey that this is actually sort of an antiquated way of measuring, and that in our instance it doesn't give us any real benefit because there are already restrictions. The size of the building is already going to be restricted due to things like the amount of green space that we have to have, by the setback requirements, by the height requirements. That's going to make sure that our building is not too big for the space anyway. But where I think we're really getting hung up is the argument has been made that if in the 1 in a million chance that somehow a developer, that the map stayed as was, and a developer was able to come purchase back pieces of property from several different landowners, combine them together and get it through the planning board, which would still have to review it, that a large building would have to be, would be permitted to be built there without a FAR restriction. I think that's next to impossible, but I'll go with it for that purpose. But conversely, on a smaller lot, say for example, 2 Main Street, if you wanted to put a 3-story building on that lot, it would end up sort of looking like a mini skyscraper because you'd be so restricted on square footage that the building footprint would have to be very, very small vis-a-vis the size of the lot itself. So I think, you know, if we're not willing to get rid of the concept of the FAR, which I wish we were, but if we're not willing to do that, I'd like to at least open the door to discussing having a tiered application of a FAR, where if a lot is a certain size, we could have a more restrictive FAR. And if a lot was a smaller size, we could allow for a slightly larger FAR to just allow for a building that actually fits the space. Everyone's very concerned, as they should be, and we are too, about how this will actually look at the end of the day if the zoning law were to go through. And I think that having a tiered approach, and I'd be willing to, you know, put something together for people to view, or I'm not sure the best way to open this discussion, but I would love to have that discussion because I think it would get all parties to the place that they're comfortable with, and make an actual viable solution and allow for appropriate and viable development in the downtown. So those are my 3 proposals. I would love to hear any feedback that anybody has to offer on, you know, how we should move forward or what the procedural steps would be to implement some of these changes. And I thank you for your time again and for your consideration.
Before we end tonight's public hearing for tonight, we'll get back and answer those last few questions that you had, Julie.
Thank you.
I'm going to propose a way forward between now and October 5th. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Yep, we still have about 5 people who would like to speak. Andrew,
Can I just ask, I'm sorry, excuse me, before we lose Julie Connolly off the panel. Julie, the architect's rendering that previously one of the residents had asked about, I believe those are the ones that were presented in the June 2021, July 2021 newsletter that were part of a PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what presentation you're referring to. You mean from just a couple of months ago? I don't remember.
Yeah, there were some images in a PowerPoint that was presented and then included in the newsletter that had floor area ratio, the gross floor area, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Thank you. Yeah, the
Right,
floor
they
area.
showed like little green yards with the little houses in different sizes with the buildings.
Yes,
et cetera.
thank you, Karina. for
Those are the
clarifying.
renderings that I think you're talking about that were asked about as well, right? Those are the only architectural renderings currently.
No, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing. So back about 2 years ago, we had engaged an architect to just sort of put together what we thought our vision of downtown would be. And that was before we actually had a draft of a bylaw. So once we had the draft of a bylaw, questions came out, and I think these are perfectly reasonable questions. And I'm glad they were asked, you know, how do these renderings fit with these metrics to these, because we didn't have metrics to apply previously. So we've since gotten back in touch with the architects that we had previously worked with and said, hey, if you saw this bylaw and you wanted to put together a rendering for a proposal on a piece of property downtown, how would this work? So we haven't, so, you know, we started working with him that we have not engaged him to actually do any additional renderings at this point, because pretty quickly into his investigations, he pointed out a couple things that he saw were problematic. So, you know, through this process, We've engaged a zoning consultant. We've engaged a zoning attorney. We've had many rounds, many very productive rounds of negotiation. So we ended up with this document. We wanted to make sure that the document actually worked in application. So
I just
that
wanted
was
to
the
show
process
that
of-
the illustrations that were in this PowerPoint from the June 2021 EDC newsletter, that showed some images there. Just referencing back, if anybody wanted to see that, they could go to the public hearing documents for the planning board public hearing on July 19th, and they're listed on the website under news and announcements. So you can find that presentation there for anyone who's listening. Thanks. Thanks, Julie.
Andrew, you're all set?
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Andrew Dennington, 10 Carolyn Terrace from the Board of Selectmen. First, I wanted to thank, and I'm just speaking on behalf of myself, obviously not for the board. Just wanted to thank all the members of the planning board for their attention to this. From my perspective, in terms of Don, you were saying, that the next thing you want to think about is what's going to be the focus of your next hearing is. From my perspective, there were kind of three main issues heading into this. One, the map, two, the development standards, and three, the design guidelines. So first on the map, my own personal view is I've followed this discussion for a couple months, and I think that the proposal that Mr. Miller set forward is, seems like it strikes a balance between, I think that addresses the split lot problem that had come up earlier, and really, the map that he had put forward, would put more of the focus of the new proposal on the Main Street area, which I think has a certain appeal to me. On the second, on the development standards, I think that the most significant, thing that your board could look at between now and then would be the issue that Mr. Hoganson had raised about the definition of mixed-use development. I know Julie made some suggestions there. The percentage, I know I've heard people that have concerns about that. Would that make this too much of a housing focus? So, that number is something that, your board can take a look at, as well as the concern Mr. Hoganson addressed about G3. And the design guidelines, I understand that there's a working group in progress that's looking at that, but I see that as really the place where the planning board would have its oversight over any development proposals under this new bylaw. And the planning board would have the power to amend the design guidelines from time to time. The things that I think are not on the list of things between now and the next meeting are, it's not really possible to come up with a mathematical model which would give any type of certainty what the economic benefits in terms of increased tax revenue or anything like that from this would be, because it would simply be overly speculative. And one, also the boundaries of the map are also still in flux somewhat. So that's my 2 cents. Again, I think from the public hearings that you've conducted so far, I see this as an example of the process working, particularly, the concerns that Mr. Miller addressed about how this affects Lattisquama Road. I see that the proposal that he addressed there is something that, is very productive. And the same thing with the concerns that Mr. Hoganson addressed about, the percentage. I still hold out hope here that, there's a way that we can get to a proposal that your board approves, then it comes back to our board, and we could maybe have something that's all a consensus document. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. We have Patrick Stanton. Patrick, you all set?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to reiterate my support for the zoning laws for the downtown district. I'm a resident at 24 Main Street, so I understand the necessity for maintaining historical accuracy and development of the town, but I believe solutions such as this are important to the development of town. So just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Claire Reynolds one more time.
Anyone who hasn't,
Nope. Just both Claire and Kevin Miller both have their hands raised again.
go to Claire.
Thank you very much. I will be very quick since I already spoke, but I just wanted to address, Mr. Hokuson brought up some very good points. The one that I wanted to address was about any kind of cost benefit analysis that has been done. And one of the things that was a homework item, which Don, you had set out from one of the planning board meetings. I don't have the document in front of me, but I had sat down, in fact, Marika and I sat down with Paul Sabelli and just put together an estimate of what the planned property tax would be, considering that there were residential units and that there were also commercial units. Also taking a look at some of the building permit fees that the town would realize. That was the document that was sent to the planning board. I can take a look tomorrow if nobody remembers it. I can take a look tomorrow and resend it to everyone and be glad
Excuse
to do
me,
that.
Claire, are you referring to, it was like towards the end of July? It might be the one that was in November 2020 EDC newsletter that had cost analysis included.
It was in the newsletter, and then I resent it when Don had brought it up at one of the public hearings, but this was after November of 20 because the public hearings didn't start until after that.
Yeah, July 21st. I think if you look there.
Okay, thank you very
much.
much. Yeah.
Okay.
And these are figures that, and they were just roughly done, but as somebody is bringing up here, thank you very much. A big thank you to Paul Sabelli, who put in that and provided the numbers for a couple of hypothetical developments. So that information is in progress. It's actually a working document. As I think it was Andrew Dennington who said, it's a little bit difficult to figure out what the revenue is actually going to be until you decide what kind of businesses are going to be there. And don't forget, we're not talking about developing a whole lot of property here. So it's not going to be the cure for the town's tax shortages, possibly. All right, so that's one thing that I wanted to bring up. I think the other thing is Mr. Miller brought up a problem about no one knows the cost of the wastewater. This was done in conjunction with, somebody mentioned a figure of $150,000 of grant money to come up with this study. That is incorrect. The town applied for a grant for the Economic Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The town received a $50,000 grant. $43,000 of that money was spent. $19,000 of it was for Weston and Sampson to provide their wastewater feasibility study. As part of that study, and it is also posted out on the EDC website, is the cost that it would be to actually run. Now, don't forget, these are all best guesstimates, so to speak, based on typical kinds of systems. Once again, a system cannot totally be designed until a decision is made in terms of what is going to be allowed for the uses in the town. However, there is a cost, and it isn't in anywhere near some of the numbers that have been brought up. Granted, funding for the system is still TBD, but this is just something that had to be done in terms of, it was a recommendation in terms of what would it cost to take a look at the problems with wastewater in the downtown. So I think the other thing is, one of the things I've noticed is by right zoning, and I'm not going to get into it, is totally misunderstood. And I think that to tie by right zoning with bypassing the planning board is totally incorrect. All by right zoning does is it lets the developer know ahead of time what they can put in the downtown area. It doesn't bypass the planning board at all. So I think that pretty much does it. I have my recommendation in terms of we're running out of time here, folks. We have 7 weeks to get this to town meeting for the November 1st. So I have my recommendations and I would be glad to discuss them with anybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have someone who hasn't spoken yet. Freddie Gillespie has her hand raised. Freddie, you all set?
Hi, everyone. Freddie Gillespie, 78 Southville Road. I'm chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, who in the past has reviewed this code numerous times and then stopped because it kept changing. And we voted to take a look when it seemed like it was going to be a final version. And we don't have confidence that that's happened. And I'm a little concerned. Are you saying the warrant's going to be closed in 3 weeks and we're still hearing from the Economic Development Committee they want to make changes? Is that what I heard tonight? So there is not a final, I mean, I understand through the hearing that things could come up and changes be recommended or not, but for the, my concern is through that the sponsoring committee is still talking about changes this late in the game. And we decided not to keep reviewing it because we would, you know, we have other things to be working on, and we kept reviewing it and writing comments. And then the next month we'd have to go through it again. And it seems like we're still not there yet, 3 weeks before the warrant closes. And I heard some mention of the open space being some of the things they want to change. So I'm just letting you know that the Open Space Preservation Commission has been engaged in this, but put a stop to our continued what's felt like a waste of time for us when we had other things to work on until there was a final document. And whether it's at town meeting or not, well, we will have comments to make. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin Miller, one more time.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Morris, you may find it uncomfortable to have the competence and professionalism of your committee praised in a public forum, but it beats being repeatedly misrepresented on a public call, as I have been this evening. I just want to point out for people who have not followed this very closely over the last 9 or 10 months, and as someone who has been on every call and witnessed every EDC meeting, live or on the recording, I want to point out that leaving the split lot parcels out of the new map that would, as a matter of law, be drawn with the creation of a downtown district would in no way disenfranchise those lot owners of any of their existing rights whatsoever, that it would simply keep them in the existing business village district and keep them subject to the review of the planning board. That's all the proposal that I put forward and that is represented by Sarah's mapping number 2. It would preserve the status quo and leave those lots subject to the review of the planning board. The last thing I would say that the adoption of map 4, mock-up 4, which would in fact expand the present boundaries of the business village district to include not only the let's say a 25 park, the barn and the field, but the house itself, which currently isn't in the business village district and would further expand the towing company lot at 5 Number Park, would frankly be an insult to everybody on Lattisquama and Foley Drive and all the abutters. And I think it would be a disastrous move and to be resisted at all costs. And once again, simply taking, the comment is about taking the split lot owners out. It's not taking them out of anything. It would be leaving them exactly where they are today, with no by right sweetener and at the same time, out of respect for those lot owners, absolutely no diminishment of their rights. And so it seems to me an absolute no-brainer to leave those folks alone, to protect their rights and privileges under the current zoning, and to protect the abutters by having those rights and privileges subject to the thorough review of the planning board. And thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more. David Perry just raised his hand. David, you're all set?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you can. Yes, I'd just like to make a comment. I haven't been listening to the entire meeting, but I did catch a few comments. Because there's been some remarks made about whether this zoning article emphasizes the potential for new commercial uses in the downtown area versus housing, and versus its emphasis on housing. And there was a comment made, I think, by Julie Connolly that I think she said more or less that the emphasis they had was to allow housing within mixed use. You have commercial on the lower floors and housing above. But what's happening here is far more than that, because there's another clause in this article. I believe it's D paragraph C6, where multifamily housing is allowed as a sole use, up to 12 units. Multifamily as a sole use. So it's very misleading to say that this zoning article is just intended to have emphasized commercial, new commercial with housing on upper floors possibly, or all commercial, because it also allows 100% multifamily use. Now, I think this reflects other comments which have been made in the past about whether this zoning article should in fact, could in fact be classified as a housing plan as much as it is a commercial plan. So anyway, I see someone is moving the scroll here. Do you see C6? Whoever has control of that, C6. Where is it? Why is there? Yes, okay. Is that right? Multifamily housing up to 12 units. Is that still in the bylaw? Can someone comment? Is that still there? As I read it, that's still in the bylaw. So there it is. It says multifamily housing up to 12 units. That's a sole use, 100%. So a property in this area could be developed for nothing but multifamily housing without any commercial. I just wanted to make that clear so people understand, this is a housing plan as much as it is a new commercial plan. You understand what I'm getting at? Thank you. Thank you, David. Anyone else? It's getting late.
Yes, Julie would like to speak again. Julie, you all set?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Julie Connolly, 26 Granuel. Very quick, because I know it's late. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Perry's comment, and I'm trying to quickly pull up the code, the current code, but I haven't been able to be quite quick enough, and I don't want to waste people's time. But I just want to point out that I'm almost certain that the current code actually allows for solely residential purposes as well. So I don't think that that's a change, but I'm trying to confirm that. But again, our intent was not to make strictly a housing code. It was to add the right to have mixed use, which is not currently allowed under the current zoning bylaw. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
John, before we leave the public hearing, just a quick bit of administrative work that I failed to bring up prior to the public hearings. I just wanted to point out that Jesse Stein has provided Mullins forms that were filed with the town clerk for missing the August 16th, 2021 public hearings for 6 to 8 Turnpike, as well as the zoning amendment for the downtown district that's proposed. So that paperwork was filed indicating that Jesse Stein had reviewed the information as required in order to continue to participate.
Okay, thank you. As stated, probably more than once or twice in the last couple of hours, we're running out of time here. And currently scheduled to have our next planning board meeting on September 27th, just 2 weeks from tonight. What I propose, what I would like to ask the board if they're available and willing to meet next Monday, the 20th, September 20th, for a one agenda item meeting, which would be the downtown district. And during that time, I would hope, practically insist that if we don't have the design guidelines, I guess, that are being worked on, if we don't have those in time for that meeting, and that doesn't mean at 5 minutes of 7 on Monday night, then it's going to be a very, very unproductive meeting. If we do vote tonight to continue the public hearing to September 20th. I would ask if we have those design guidelines in enough time for us to review, then we would develop our opinions and state them at our next meeting as individuals and, if possible, as a board. Same thing for the code language, which as recently as a half hour ago, revisions were proposed. We need those in writing. I would expect them to be in writing from someone on the Board of Selectmen and or the EDC, so that if we do work on those and comment on those at a later date, we don't hear, well, we didn't back those up, or that was just from one person. We need action. We need these things in writing. So if we do meet next Monday, we can have all of the materials that we need to move forward. Our September 27th meeting is rather full at this time and would probably not do justice or have enough time for the continued public hearing to go into as much time on the 27th as we did tonight. So I'll ask the board if there's any desire or availability to meet 7 o'clock next Monday. One agenda item with a goal to review, have the public hear our comments relative to the design guidelines, which we better receive, to the revisions to the code, and also a position on the map. Mr. Mills.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd be open to and willing to be available next Monday. I think that's a great idea, so we can really focus on it. And hopefully we get all those changes in ahead of time so we can review them and, you know, in the public and see what the changes would be too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein.
I am available for the meeting on the 27th. I'm not available a week from tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Luttrell.
I'm available next Monday night.
Thank you. Mrs. Houlihan?
I'm available next Monday night. I think, as Andrew stated, it'd be great if we could get that like by Thursday, just with work and not spending my entire weekend reading them, but be helpful to get them earlier than Monday morning.
Karina, you think we can do that? Continue the hearing, post it for Monday, the 20th?
I'm fully confident that we can get an agenda posted for that meeting. I'm concerned with the documents arriving by Thursday with enough time for the planning board to review. That's my opinion, but I can stay optimistic. We can do the administrative part. We just need the materials that need to be reviewed.
We need the materials. The record will show that the board has volunteered another night of our September life to try to move this forward and meet the deadline without a rush job to get there. And so the selectmen can close the warrant on their schedule for the November 1st town meeting. Sarah, Kate, Monday, okay?
Sounds good.
I want to thank everybody, the public, for participating. Sure, we'll see you next week. As soon as we get those documents, they'll get posted. The revised documents, we'll get them posted on the planning board website, which is our responsibility.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, Andrew Deddington has his hand raised again, so I don't know if you wanted to comment on the schedule or
Only if it covers something we haven't covered.
I was just going to note as a scheduling matter, first off, thank you for your willingness to schedule an out of order meeting. Looks like the next Board of Selectmen meeting is actually not until the 21st, but then it sounds like you would also still be having your regularly scheduled meeting on the 27th, right?
Yeah, we have to, because we have, we'll be having public hearings on the 27th and other planning board business, which we try to conduct also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll be meeting 3 weeks in a row. If this motion passes to continue the public. Anything else, Mr. Mills?
Well, did I hear Andrew correctly that they're not meeting until the 21st?
That's what he said.
So then we wouldn't get any changes that the selectmen would have approved.
Well, one selectman has been, as far as I know, one selectman has been assigned to, from the Board of Selectmen to work with the EDC. And to me, if that person doesn't have the authority to send these proposed changes to us, then I would suggest the Board of Selectmen post an additional meeting to make it official. We gotta keep this thing moving, and okay.
I just want to make sure I'm clear, and I appreciate you clarifying that, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. But hopefully everyone else will be as flexible as we're being to move this along. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Andrew, because even though at our hearing here tonight, we heard these changes proposed verbally, it's really essential that we get this stuff in writing so that we can, have a firm product to consider and have a productive continued hearing.
Agreed.
Mr. Mills.
So I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for the proposed downtown district bylaw, the zoning map and design guidelines to continue to September 20th at 7 o'clock.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We'll see you next Monday. Next item on the agenda is approval not required for 19 John Street. Somebody can put that up on the screen and we'll ask the town planner to update us on this one.
This is approval not required, A&R application Form A for 19 John Street, property owner Andrew Jenks. It's in Residence B. The plan was prepared by Thompson and Liston. I believe there's a representative here.
I am.
There you are, Seth. Okay, super. The application was received and filed on September 2nd. And essentially, I'll just give a quick rundown to make it fast. The property at 19 John Street will maintain its frontage and area. They are seeking to parcel off approximately 6,000 square foot piece in the back corner as a non-buildable lot at this time, with the potential for future conveyance to the property at 8 Leonard Street. So that's where we're at. I did review the plan. Some revisions were made and they resubmitted and in proper format, which was allowed us to file it with the town clerk and accept the application. That's it.
Mr. Liston, you're on.
All right. My name is Seth Liston. I'm with Thompson Liston Associates. And we're here to basically represent the two parties who agreed on this parcel exchange. At this time, there's no intent, or at least it isn't being proposed now, to combine the two lots, parcel B with Mr. Yang's other property. All of the points, all of the new corners have been pinned, and it's basically for Mr. Yang's use. We believe there's a garden that he's been maintaining on this piece of property, and Mr. Jenks has agreed to sell a portion of the property so that he can continue to maintain the garden on his own property, essentially. And we're all saying that this is not to be considered a building lot.
Sarah, can you run the point across the proposed new lines?
Marty is actually controlling the screen at the moment, but she's doing a great job.
Just run the.
Can you see it?
Yeah, just run it along the lines that are being added to this plan. Three lines.
That is correct.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay, open up to the board, Mr. Mills.
I wish Mr. Jenks was here so I could make sure he had the adequate frontage, but I know that was already said because I recall him going through the motions on every planning board meeting we had for an A&R. I have no questions.
Mr. Stein.
I think that he also used to draw like that linear point to the street or something like that. Nobody could do it like Bill. I certainly have no questions.
Mrs. Luttrell.
No questions.
Mrs. Houlihan.
No questions.
I have no questions. We'll entertain a motion to endorse the A&R.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes?
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Very good. Saying hi to Phil tonight, if he's there. Next item on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Lister.
Just to point out, we'll have the endorsement form in Mylar. We'll email the planning board members when it's ready to sign.
Okay.
And then we'll let you know when it's ready to pick up. So.
Much appreciated. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Next item is a discussion item, 156 Northborough Road, site plan compliance.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry.
Which is a positive way of saying site plan non-compliance?
Yes, and Michael Quinn is in the attendee list.
I'm promoting him.
Okay, so to give a brief update, 156 Northborough Road was permitted a few years ago under 154, 156 Northborough Road to become contractor bays, which at the time were going to be rented to tenants. There was a major site plan and also a LID special permit that was granted. And during permitting, there was extensive discussion of the landscaping aspects, particularly due to the fact that the stormwater management was proposed using rain gardens, which were also partially to be constructed on town property, for which they got a license from the Board of Selectmen. Recently, there were concerns with the lighting that was built onto the property on the sides of the building that was non-compliant. That has since been removed. It's my understanding that the remaining lights are in proper form, to the best of my knowledge at this point, without having the as-built reviewed. In addition, it was found that the landscaping has not been in compliance with what was required with the planting list plan that was approved. Mimi Luttrell, Melissa Danza, the conservation agent, and I met with Michael Quinn, who represents Kane Built, who is the contractor, the builder, and also owner of the property, on site to view the property. At which time we asked him to supply planting lists, which they did. Those were reviewed, and it was found that the majority were not native species and did not match the planting list. So it was a big enough problem that, it was significant enough that it's not something I could just deal with one or two plants. So Michael Quinn is here to just reiterate his status of the project, how he got here, and wanted to put that before the planning board to determine how to mitigate this issue. Whether they are required to do a modification, if that would be acceptable, or other avenues of non-compliance. So I'll leave it at that. There's also an as-built required, which will be reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill once it's received. We require this stemmed because they want a certificate of occupancy, because currently the contractor bays are going to be condos, which are sold as opposed to rentals. So we're also in receipt of some partial condo documents that will need to be reviewed by town council in their search for certificate of occupancy, which in discussions with the building department, that possibly they would get a temporary certificate of occupancy if the condo documents were acceptable, with the contingency that no permanent certificate of occupancy until as-built are supplied that include lighting and landscaping, and also are reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill, our engineering consultant, and found to be acceptable. So that's where we stand. And again, Michael Quinn's here with Kane. He represents Kane Built.
Mr. Quinn.
Mike, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So again, my name is Michael Quinn. I'm with Kane Built Inc. We're the owners and builders of the property. First of all, what we do normally is when we take on a project like this, we develop a plans and specifications. And we develop a book for the construction supervisor and other important subcontractors. In this book, which I have one of them in front of me. There's 12 sections. Each section has the approved plans and language that was approved by the planning board. So we give this to the site construction supervisor, and then he gives out sections of that book to the various subcontractors. In this particular case, he gave it the landscaping plan and list of plants that are required to a landscaper, who then gave them to a subcontractor, who then gave them to a supplier, and somewhere along the line, the list got changed. So ultimately, it is my problem, and I apologize for being in this situation. We, again, not normally left to so many subcontractors getting involved, but everybody was busy. Plants were hard to come by. So once again, it's my problem, my fault, and I accept that responsibility. During the last 60 days or so, I've had many conversations with Karina, and I've tried to hire Subgroup Design Group on many occasions to try to help correct this, because they were involved in the original approval. They told me at one point they had no interest because they were just too busy. I went and hired another landscape architect named was Kim Ahern. She talked to Karina, I believe, once or twice, and then decided it was too much for her. We hired another landscape architect, and they basically said that they didn't believe that the plans that were approved would work in this particular type of application. So they were not interested. So I went back to Sudbury Design Group, pleaded with them to come on board, and they have agreed to do so. I've also hired a Mass certified landscape professional named Dan Faulkner. Both these people have worked with various suppliers, and they did mention they're going to try to work with Bigelow Nurseries out of Southborough to correct the plants that we have that have not been planted in accordance with the plans. So that's where we are now. The Mass certified landscape professional, Dan Faulkner, and Peter Furland, who works in Subgroup Design Group, neither one could make this evening's meeting. They will be available for a future meeting, but in the meantime, we have started to identify the plants that are there and identify the plants that need to be changed. We also have a third category that we will be forthcoming to the planning board. That is, we can't obtain some of the plants that were on the original approval. So we will be asking for some waivers or some type of relief. We just can't find them. We couldn't find them last fall. We couldn't find them in the spring. We can't find them today. So that's where we're at. We are seeking a temporary CO, certificate of occupancy, because the building is stagnant right now. We want to get some life back into it and get moving. Under the approvals, I believe that the planning board has some control over a whole year once the plantings have been approved. So we're not going anywhere. I'm available. We're available. And now that Subgroup Design Group has agreed to come on board and identify some of the problem areas, we feel that we can get this wrapped up this fall.
To the board members and Mr. Quinn, you mentioned Bigelow Nurseries. My son is a certified horticulturalist working at Bigelow, so I will step aside and turn the chair to Mr. Mills.
Andrew, you're muted.
Sorry. So, Mr. Quinn, you said the plantings you were going to be able to get or some of them you weren't going to be able to get to the spring at all?
Some of them were not available last spring, and they were also not available last fall. So right now, the Mass Certified Landscape Professional we've also hired an arborist and landscape architect, Subgroup Design Group. They're going to identify those plants, and we're going to have to come in and ask for some type of waiver because we just can't obtain them. So basically, from what I understand, I was not involved in the permitting process on this particular site, but all the species that were specified were native species. And some of them, as I said, we just could not locate them. We called Site 1, we called Bigelow, we called several other landscape suppliers in the area. And we just couldn't obtain them. Another problem we've discovered once I've submitted these plans to various landscape architects, some of the species of plants identified or requested to be planted, it's been recommended to me that they not be planted in the particular locations because they may be native, but they're not native to be next to a parking lot or next to a building. They really belong in like a canopied area. So we will be coming back to the board requesting a variance.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. I don't know if that was for everyone or just me. So you're coming back for a variance?
Well, we're coming back for some type of change in the approved plan because once again, some of them we can't obtain. Some of them don't, it's been suggested to us they don't apply to this type of use next to a parking lot or next to a building. There's just been too much sunlight. And some of these plants only survive in an area, like a very wooded area where there's a large canopy and there's lots of shade and moist soil.
So it's my understanding, Andrew, Michael, what you're indicating is that you would be submitting a modification to site plan in the future?
That's correct.
So would that be also for the fact that these would no longer be rentals, but now you're going to sell them as condos?
It has nothing to do with that. It has only to do with we're trying to get the certificate of occupancy, and we're trying to get the building occupied. We would plant what has been specified, but we just can't find the product. It's not available.
Have you partnered at all with the Open Space Committee? They were very involved with the plantings that were put into this. I know you weren't part of the original group that came before us, or the proponent that came before us, but this was a lengthy and involved original review with Open Space.
I have not spoken with them, but I'd be more than happy to speak with them and get their input along with the landscape architect and the certified landscape professional and the arborist or botanist, whoever else we're going to use. I'd be more than happy to have them be part of the solution to some of the problems that we're facing.
Okay. Karina or Sarah, can you tell us Freddie still? I know she spoke earlier. I don't know if she's still.
Let me take a look. She does. She is still here. Freddie, you're all set to speak.
Hi, everyone. This is Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission. And I'm speaking as an individual who participated in this process. Our whole commission reviewed and played a role in the approval of this project, but we haven't met to discuss anything because there's nothing in front of us yet. But on this changes, I would say I would be very willing to talk with the new property owner and project manager I would note that the Open Space Preservation Commission did not design this nor recommend the specific plants. That was done by a landscape architect. I think the one you have now hired again. Believe it was Sudbury. So there's that piece of it that I would imagine that any changes, if you can't get plants and, there's more than one place to purchase these plants, some may be harder to get than others, that the substitution would need to be another native straight species, not a cultivar, not a non-native or not native to New England. So that's just a ballpark idea, but I would just wanted to say we did not set the design. We just advocated for the fact that they would be native straight species. And this is being done all across the state now. So I'd be very interested in finding out which plants can't be obtained, because maybe I know of a place that has them. Maybe I don't, but it would just be interesting to see which ones you can't find.
Yeah, we will identify those and have those available for the town to review. As far as the cultivars are concerned, the Mass Certified Landscape Professional we had, Dan Faulkner, went to UMass recently and had a lengthy discussion with University of Massachusetts about this particular site and about these cultivars. And they came back with some recommendations that I am anxious to forward to the town to get their opinion on, because they have reason to believe that some of these cultivars, the hybrids are designed for a particular application like this, rather than just straight native species. So we will be looking forward to sharing that with you, the town, and get your opinion on that.
May I respond, Andrew?
Yeah.
So the point of using straight species is because of their conservation ecological value that the cultivars don't. By definition, cultivars aren't native plants. And the town of Southborough, the Open Space Commission and others have been working with scientists on in town as part of research, and know quite well why we don't recommend any use of cultivars. You might as well plant, for the most part, it negates the whole purpose of having a native plant. They're designed for attractiveness and what people like to see, but not for the ecological benefit. And that's why we worked so hard to get this plan in place. And we thought, working with a, landscape architect, that they had come up with a good plan. We're not landscape architects, so can't say what, where they made a miss or not. But if you want to go back and change plants, we will strongly advocate that it sticks to the same requirements that the original plan had, which was native plants, straight species, no cultivars, native to New England. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is not I'm not an expert in this at all. That's why I've hired a Mass Certified Landscape Professional, the landscape architect, an arborist, and a botanist. And they all feel strongly about some of these cultivars are made a hybrid for this type of use. I'll submit something to the town for you people to decide, but I think we should go in with this with an open mind.
Agreed. I think if you can partner with the Open Space Committee, and I know Mimi would probably be very interested as well. I'm not trying to speak for you, Mimi. I'll give you a shot in a second, but the first time hearing of this, being brought before us as a discussion item. So I think the starting point would be with the open space. The other piece, Karina, just if they are going to switch from rentals to condos, just what does that have to do, the change in what was originally permitted? I haven't seen that come before us in the past. So that would be, if we're going to make a change overall, let's combine it all in one for everything, so that we don't have, ongoing lingering issues that we're trying to resolve with this property. So with that said, Mr. Stein, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the 6 Turnpike matter that was before us earlier this evening. We owe it to the town and our stewardship of the planning department that we honor what was committed to on an original site plan. And it has to be a very compelling case, at least for me, to make any variances or concessions on a site plan that was agreed upon by a proponent, and then a proponent failing to fulfill the commitment that was made. So it's very disappointing to hear this. And I certainly understand the position that the current proponent is in, that they've sort of, inherited an incomplete site plan or an incomplete situation, if you will. But it is what it is. And if it's going to be brought to compliance to the satisfaction of the Open Space Commission, then I might entertain voting in support of a site plan revision. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe.
I agree with Mr. Stein. We spent a lot of time on the landscape portion of this plan, and there was a certified landscape architect that proposed this plan. I assume they believe that it could be built as proposed. I went on the site walk, and the landscaping isn't even close to what the approved plans show. I didn't see any of the wildflower seed mix. I know that's pretty easy to come by, but I didn't see any of that. There were, a lot of weeds and plants I couldn't really identify, and non-native plants, non-native trees, Japanese dogwood. So it was pretty far off and pretty disappointing. And I'm happy to hear that the intention is to make corrections and put this back on the right track. Does that mean that the plantings that are there that are not in compliance are going to be pulled out and replaced?
Yes. Yeah. So again, we'll have to have a discussion on the ones that we can't obtain, and I'll be more than happy to work with the Open Space Committee on trying to locate some of those plantings. But if we can't obtain them, then we'll have to come back with a different species. So maybe the Open Space Committee can recommend something native that could be replaced with what we have there. So a lot of those will be removed.
So in that sense, Andrew, modification would only be required if they can't meet what was approved on the landscaping plan, or substitutions that working with the Open Space Preservation Commission and with me, as it's conditioned in the decision that any substitutions are supposed to be, approved through planning as well, through the town planner. If they comply, if they remove all the plants that are non-compliant and install plants that are substitutable in agreement and compliant with the site plan, I'm wondering if a full modification application would be needed, or an assessment with a defined, with an as-built submitted that includes the landscaping, that then gets reviewed by a landscape architect consultant along with the civil site components. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work until we figure out which way we're gonna go in terms
Right.
of it needs a modification or not, and I still,
Okay.
the change from being rentals now to condos that they're gonna sell. I wanna look into that piece as well, Karina.
Mhm. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. If, let's address everything holistically in one fell swoop, not just one piece at a time. So,
Okay.
Mimi, was that all you had?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Houlihan?
Yes, I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Mills and Mr. Stein and Mrs. Latrell around, holistically approaching this. And I wasn't involved and I was the newest planning member, so I wasn't involved in this. But it's a little disconcerting understanding that someone would develop this and not actually produce what was approved. So I would like to follow the other planning board's lead.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Quinn, and is it feasible, and I don't know if Karina, if you already have this on the agenda for the 27th or not?
I do not, because it's a very full agenda and it's only a week and a half away,
Okay.
relatively.
So then the week or the next meeting after that, if we could have it again to get an update as to one, what the impact of switching the from rentals to condos, how that affects the plan that was originally approved, and two, obviously all the plantings. The one other thing, I don't know if anyone saw this on when they did the walk, but there was supposed to still be a monument out front or a memorial for the Murphy girls. I don't know if that was still there or not, or if that got missed as well. But
That is there.
That is there. Okay. So if we can do it, I don't know, what's the next meeting after the 27th?
It's October 18th.
October 18th. Okay.
Mhm.
So if
So
we
we
can
can
have
put that on the agenda
Okay.
as a discussion item and get the status at that point.
Mr. Quinn, does that give you enough time, you think, to meet with everyone and for a plan?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions from the board or from the public?
No, I just want to say thank you for your time this evening. I know you guys are working late tonight. And I appreciate you listening.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your honesty and coming forth and willing to work with getting this rectified. Appreciate it.
Okay.
So, all right. Thank
See
you.
you. Yep, you're welcome.
Yep, we'll move to the next
Thank you.
agenda item. And if we get Mr. Morris back, we will do a peaceful transition of power back to the chair. And
Thank you,
consider-
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion item review of outdoor illumination rules and regulations. Karina.
All right, really quickly, the enforcement section of the rules and regulations for outdoor illumination was sent to the Board of Selectmen, Town Administrator in August. Unfortunately, it got bumped from that meeting. It was supposed to be on September 8th, 2021 Board of Selectmen agenda, but it has since been bumped to the Board of Selectmen's meeting on September 21st. So we can report back on the Board of Selectmen's feedback regarding the enforcement section of the rules at the September 27th Planning Board meeting.
Any questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is other business properly before the board, the planners report. Karina.
Planners report. Very quickly. You're all aware of the new preamble that was added, the shortened version for the meetings. So Mimi, you got that, and we passed that on to Shopsy as well for their meetings. It is with great sadness that I want to announce officially this evening that Sarah is resigning her role. she's found a new position that allows her to have more time at home under her own hours, and will also expand her professional growth in learning new things. Sarah, as you know, lives quite a distance from Southborough, and the commute has been kind of extensive. So we appreciate that she's hung out this long. So Sarah's going to help by working with me to transition until we find a replacement. She'll still assist with facilitating some of the meetings. So that's good news. It's great. I appreciate that, Sarah. I wish you well, and right now we'll still be working together.
Yes.
During the transition, but her last full-time day is Friday. I'll be sending an email tomorrow to the departments to let everybody know who doesn't know yet.
It's been a pleasure working with everybody, and I get really choked up when I talk about leaving, but it is a great opportunity for me and my family. But it's been fantastic. You all are a very engaged and very talented board, and I feel very blessed to have known all of you.
Sarah, I can just say you were really going to miss you. It's been great having you, and appreciate all the driving that you've done all this
Thank
time.
you.
And I wish you the best. And if there's anything, recommendations or anything you need, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Sarah, is there a way after we adjourn tonight for the 8 of us to just stay on Zoom without, in an admin, a brief admin meeting?
Sure.
Is the board in favor of that for a few minutes?
Sure.
Let's move on to the next agenda item, please. Which is, we all done with the planners, with the minutes? Can we go on to the minutes?
Yes, we can go on to the minutes. That's it.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from August 16th, 2021 as written.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
After, if a motion to adjourn gets enough votes, should we just sit here and then wait for you to tell us it's just the 8 of us?
Yes.
Mr. Mills.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
We're adjourned.